Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Andrew Yang, Unsuspend Elements, and Waco, Texas, 1993. All right, so why are we talking about Waco, Texas? The word Waco has become in many ways synonymous with the standoff that happened there in 1993. The reason why we're talking about it today is Netflix Waco. And there's a whole lot to talk about here from a political perspective. All right, so one, let's talking about Waco, Texas, the 1993 Waco, Texas standoff in congruence with Andrew Yang's unsuspend plans, or lack thereof. Now, I am in favor of Andrew Yang unsuspending immediately. A lot of people don't agree with this. They think, what's the point? There's so many obstacles, blah, 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 blah. And that's what it all is. It's all blah, blah. Andrew Yang should absolutely unsuspend immediately. Not because of the strength of an Andrew Yang unsuspend plan, but because of the weakness of Joe Biden as a candidate. This is critically important to understand. Joe Biden can bounce out of this election so easily, it's not even funny. And it truly is not funny. Okay? So, how could that happen? Well, I can give you two incredibly recent, incredibly specific examples. One, Bernie October 2019. Boom. That happens to Joe, you're done. Period. Right? And the whole thing gets rebooted. Right? So, if Andrew Yang is already unsuspended, head start. That's the important part. That's you have to understand. If Andrew Yang unsuspends, he looks like what he is, a genius that's saying the odds that Joe Biden is going to last to the conventions are ridiculously low. Okay, so one, Bernie Sanders October 2019 event is a hair's breadth away from happening. Anybody who doesn't think who thinks that is not true, it could happen at any time. There's no reason in the world it couldn't happen. In fact, I think it's far more likely now, and the reason why is Bernie Sanders said, "I was stupid. I did not listen to my body." Those were his words, right? He might have missed, like, they're about 80, 90% off. I am paraphrasing, but he was like, he said when they said, "Hey, what happened?" He's like, "I was stupid. I didn't listen to my body." Right? And what he was saying is, and he didn't want to say it because he knew he couldn't. But I think what he was saying is the strain on running for election is so incredibly high that it will break a person. Right? Now Bernie couldn't say that because he was active, right? But the reality is the strain that's on Joe Biden right now at the age of 79, right, is incredible, right? His physical and his physical state, his emotional state, and as an evangelical Christian, I can say it, his spiritual state is under assault, absolute assault, right? Now, if I have a tree in my backyard, right, and I need that tree cut down and turned into a cord of wood, I don't tell a 79-year-old person to go do it. That would be cruel and unreasonable, right? If you think that the U.S. presidential race is purely a mental job, you're not paying attention. Also, you don't know about chess. Physical chess players who compete at the highest levels can lose 10 pounds in a single world class tournament. 10 pounds. So even thought work, even knowledge work, which some people ridiculously think the U.S. primary race is, that it's not a physical job, which is outrageously foolish. Uh, what I'm saying is Andrew Yang needs to unsuspend. I am an Andrew Yang, full on. I champion. I say this guy is the president we all deserve. Okay, truly, America's awesome. We deserve an awesome president. Okay, and so I'm going to tell you that he's amazing. But the reality is, you don't need to sign on to Andrew Yang as an amazing candidate to understand that Andrew Yang's unsuspending is logical and the best possible thing he could do. Not because there's this huge probability he's going to win, but because there is a huge probability, in my opinion, that Joe Biden is not going to make it to the convention, let alone to November, let alone to 3 months into an incredibly difficult presidency, let alone year one. right? And so this is becoming, it's the joke that's nobody's laughing at. This is a bad idea to say that while a plague sweeps across the earth and the earth melts, we should have an 80, we should experiment with our first 80-year-old president. I cannot stress this enough. We need another option. So until we get there, I will talk as much as I possibly can about Andrew Yang unsuspending, and I will prime every possible pool to find ideas to get him there. All right, with that, let's do it. All right, so Netflix just released Waco. Waco. It's a miniseries, six episodes. I highly recommend it. It's extremely well executed. It's done extremely well. It's compelling, small screen content. Okay, no complaints. All right, but there's a lot to talk about here. So one of the first unsuspend element ideas that I have is Andrew Yang can deliver a structure for dealing with streaming providers, because right now, I think the government really should put in a strong set of tax breaks for major streaming providers, and should make it so that new companies can jump into the market more easily. Because I think at this point Netflix has a major head start. Why do I think that? Well, Waco, right? This thing had to cost millions. I don't think the budget on this was any less than like 5 million, maybe 10 million. Right? When I look at it, that's my guess, right? Maybe even more, considerably more, right? But Paramount made this 2 years ago and put it onto their streaming service, and all of nobody watched it. Nobody watched this thing, okay? And so while you have this incredibly compelling retelling of the story of Waco, which was done really well, Paramount created it for their streaming service, and America is going, hey, we're not signing on to a streaming service for one content creator. We want aggregators. Netflix is an aggregator, right? But Netflix has a majorly dominant position in the market. So Andrew Yang can step in and say, hey, I want to make it so that Netflix has some actual competitors beyond Disney, because Disney is in a lot of trouble now, and we need to recognize um, entertainment as a real force in American politics, and start to put some guardrails around these industries. The same way we did for steel, the same way we did for food, the same way we do for energy. And entertainment is just this ridiculous thing that stands off in the corner that there really isn't enough government oversight on. So Andrew Yang can jump in and say that. And one of the reasons why is just to be clear, right? This is like 5, 10, maybe a $20 million project, right? Nobody watched it on Paramount. And Paramount had to give up and sell it to Netflix. That is not good. That is shameful, right? Paramount is in trouble. That is not a good ending for any American business, to have to be shamed into selling your content to Netflix when you're literally in the same business they are. That's real problems, right? So that's not good. And also, just to be clear, this thing was like 2 years old. It's fantastic. I would have watched it 2 years ago. I didn't even know it existed until Netflix picked it up. So you are seeing a really dominant position shaping up for Netflix. And I don't think the government should stop that dominant position, but I don't think the American government can just sit back and pretend that we're not seeing the emergence of a massive new commercial titan. It's just not fair. It's not wise. We need to get in there. And Andrew Yang has an opportunity to put forward a good streaming competition package. And if he does that, he's talking about something that Joe Biden can't even understand. Joe Biden, he's like, come on. Here, okay, let's do it this way. I don't want to be unfair, okay? But if you have a young person and you have an older person, who's going to help who with tech? At the macro level. At the macro level. Enough said. Okay? Joe Biden, it ain't the right time for him to be our president. I'm telling you that right now. Okay? All right. So let's talk about this. So let's talk about what happened in 1993 and what it teaches us now, and let's talk about what we can mine out of this for ideas for Andrew Yang to jump back in and use as unsuspend elements. Okay? All right. So 1993, just an absolutely atrocious, horrible event. Waco, Texas, you got about 150 people in a compound. Were they a cult? Great question, right? It's talked about in the series. Um, were they a cult or they were an emergent religion? There was enough in this content for me to believe that the word cult is now useless. There's so much partisanship in America that the reality is. So basically, this one theologian in the Waco miniseries, which I recommend watching, by the way. So basically, this one theologian said, "I don't use the term cults. I use the term emergent religions." Right? And I see where he's coming from because the reality is his point was that you can't use the word cult because basically all that means is that these people do things that nobody really agrees with at the macro level, and they're not cool right now, right? Now, the reality is, without a doubt, David Koresh did some things that nobody in America signs off on. There's major questions about where he broke the law, about where he broke the law. I don't think anybody's contesting that David Koresh broke the law. What they're contesting is here's a law break, here's a law break, here's a law break. This ends in 80 people dead. Like it would like so the response and the crime, is that a match? And this series dives into this question. It dives into it in a major way, right? And but one of the things they brought out is this idea about emergent religions. So one, in my opinion, I do agree with this theologian within that material, and that's something that Andrew Yang can use as he unsuspends, is drop the cult, the drop the word cult, period, and encourage others to drop it and begin using this term emergent religions. Now, why would we talk about that? Well, there's a lot in this movie that speaks directly to our situation today. We've been talking about it and we continue to talk about it because it's coming up. Polygamy. Polygamy is in this movie. David Koresh had multiple wives, right? Now, why are we talking about this? Well, we need to talk about this. And the reason why is in Joe Biden's, if Joe Biden wins, the 1% chance, or even if Donald Trump wins, or if Andrew Yang gets his head screwed on right and unsuspends and wins, which should be a cakewalk as soon as Joe Biden hits a wall, right? And by the way, I already talked to you about the Bernie October 2019 situation that could take Biden out. There's also now the Boris Johnson April 2020 situation. High probability that could happen for Joe Biden. There's Joe Biden has no protections that Boris Johnson didn't have. Those are two things that can turn this entire election over in a New York second. Okay? All right. So let's talk about this polygamy issue, right? So one of the things that has happened that was in this Waco movie is there is just consistent negative talk about polygamy. The issue with that, so basically David Koresh absolutely practiced polygamy with elements that were wrong, culturally wrong, period, right? But if you have polygamy between two consenting adults, there's absolutely nothing within that escapes the love is love formula that now the entire nation is signed on to. And so we have this legacy where people still talk about polygamy like people used to talk about other love patterns, right? And that's going to need to get stripped away. And the reason why is there's an inconsistency. It's just an outrageous it it's an inconsistency that it's an inconsistency. Period. And people are not acknowledging that, right? And so and the reason why I'm talking about it now is I want to talk about things 3, 4, 5 years before they hit. But the idea that the road hasn't been paved for national polygamy is ridiculous. Like the love is love pattern that's been dropped, there's absolutely nothing that multiple consenting adults going into polygamy escapes. Once you have polygamy at the national level, by the way, I'm not a fan of polygamy. And the reason why is I visited Utah too much, and I just heard some stories from a lot of people who lived in Utah and had seen polygamy a little more than it's seen in some other states. And if you think I'm wrong that polygamy is not in other states, I want you to look at their craft beers and then come back to me. Okay. All right. So basically, you have this issue where it's once this drops into public life, it's going to reshape American marital relations in a fundamental way. And nobody's talking about this right now. And Andrew Yang can at least start that conversation. And again, why would he do this? Well, one, Andrew Yang is in the fantastic position that he has absolutely nothing to lose. Nothing. And he can bring about conversations that Joe Biden can't touch. And the reason why is Joe Biden's hands are bound and his feet are bound. He can't move. His positions are set, right? They're set by the blue power base. Period. He's just made too many agreements with too many people. Not any kind of corruption or anything, like just normal political shenanigans, which America has fully signed off on. All right. So you have all these elements brewing in this series, this Waco series. The other thing that this movie talks about in very careful detail is the story of three men: Gary Cosner, Jeffrey Jamar, and David Koresh. So David Koresh, he in this film, you see a perfect example of the price of arrogance, how incredibly deadly arrogance can be. And so, more than anyone else, in my opinion, the lives of those 80 people are on David Koresh. He's more responsible than anybody else, right? So you see the price of arrogance. And honestly, I think if Andrew Yang unsuspends, he is a genuinely humble person, and I think that will resonate with American voters. Okay? We also see the story of Gary Cosner. Gary Cosner was a negotiator who was incredibly patient, and with his work at the standoff, he saved 35 lives. He helped to have 35 Americans walk out the door of Waco. And in my opinion, there are 35 people alive today because of the patience of Gary Cosner. Okay? And that's incredibly important. And again, if Andrew Yang comes out, if he unsuspends, he gets to display his patience. Andrew Yang is a patient man, right? And so you see that, and if he unsuspends, America can see that again. It's a good idea, okay? Also, let's talk about Jeffrey Jamar. So Jeffrey Jamar is not really mentioned directly, to my knowledge, in the Waco movie. They have a fictional character who actually stands as the tactical lead that was in charge on that day. But Jeffrey Jamar was the siege commander at Waco. Okay, he was one of the siege commanders at Waco. And what I think the story, what the movie, what the Waco miniseries is talking about there, is the issue of urgency. Okay, and the movie talks in the movie. They're saying, hey, things need to get done. We don't have forever, right? And you need to move urgently. The problem is when you move urgently, sometimes mistakes are made. And if you look at what happened at the Waco compound, I mean, there's 80 people dead. The idea that mistakes weren't made is outrageous. I think there were definitely mistakes made, and so Andrew Yang can jump in and talk about how do we manage urgency in a world that demands urgency, but is also looking for performance. So if you look at the Waco miniseries, one, I highly recommend watching it. And I think if you do watch it, you will understand, it will give you a better insight to who and what Andrew Yang truly is. It will also remind you that Andrew Yang unsuspending is our only path to a great future for America. It's our only path. And I really think Andrew Yang needs to unsuspend right now. And the reason why is not because it's a perfect plan, but it is a much better plan than this outrageous idea that Joe Biden is going to be our president. That is an unprecedented belief. If you believe that, you're believing in something that has never, ever, ever happened. America has never had an 80-year-old president. And the idea that in a plague state, while the earth melts, that's a good idea, it's a good time to experiment? Nope, it surely is not. We truly need you to unsuspend Andrew Yang. Please consider it. All that is my opinion. Please let me know what you think in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.